which was things like accountability, assessing needs, pricing policy, and you also would have done at the end of that topic a section on public sector failure. So reasons for failure of the public sector and the effect of that on the economy. But that is a very important topic, that section on the public sector failure. It's a new essay for this year. So the problems of public sector provision used to be one of the essays that we did for macroeconomics. And this year what that added is reasons for public sector failure. So that's an important topic for you guys to be familiar with. And bureaucracy, we can see the answer for A is when officials tend to obey rules and regulations without judgment. So that is when it's 10:30, it's time for my tea break. There might be 30 people in the queue, but the rules say this, so that's what I'm going to do. Okay, and that really slows down the economy. A term we often use for red tape, for bureaucracy grade 12s is red tape. Okay, red tape. That means it's all the rules and regulations which can really slow down the functioning of the economy because it takes so long to get anything done. Why? Because officials are obeying rules but not using their judgments to make informed decisions. Right, let's try the next one, guys. An industry. What's an industry? If I say the gold industry or the retail industry, what do you guys think of? See if you can find the answer to that. Alright, everybody, the answer is I. So I would say this really comes from the section on the circular flow, or perhaps even national accounting aggregates when you did the production method. And you would look at the tertiary sector and all the industries in the tertiary sector, or the secondary sector and all the industries in the secondary sector. So what does I say, grade 12? It's all businesses that supply the same product in a market. So the gold mining industry, the textile clothing industry. Alright. Marginal utility. Guys, I wonder if any of you are going to get this one. You did this in great detail in grade 11. So let's see if anyone remembers what marginal utility is. We're swapping over to microeconomics now, grade 12s. So these first 5 questions were all macro, and these next 3 are micro. So let's see if anyone remembers what marginal utility is, guys. So if you've been crossing off all the correct answers, then it should be a little bit quicker for you to find the remaining 3. Right. Whose long-term memory is good? Guys, the answer to 1.2.6 marginal utility is D. Additional benefit. You might have learned the word satisfaction for utility. So grade 12 utility means benefit or satisfaction, and marginal means additional. So your entire definition would read the additional benefit that a consumer gets from consuming one more unit of a good or service. So when I have my first glass of Coke, for example, I might get a satisfaction or utility or benefit level of 10. And then if you remember correctly, you guys learned about the law of diminishing marginal utility, which means that for each extra glass of Coke you consume or hamburger you eat, your satisfaction is going to go down. But this question just wants the definition for marginal utility. So, guys, big thumbs up and a big round of applause to you guys if any of you remembered that, because you did it in grade 11 in detail. Alrighty, positive externalities, everybody. So that word positive could give you a little bit of a clue as to what the answer is. So let's see if anyone can figure out what positive externalities are. Remember, look for that word positive in section B. Something that could be positive, and it's an option you haven't used already? All right, guys, the answer is H. So there is that word benefit, which is something positive. So that's a clue for you. So it's benefits that a third party enjoys, resulting from a transaction in which they were not involved. Now, what does that mean? Guys, let's say something like education. Education, if you remember correctly, is an example of a merit good. A merit good has positive externalities. That means it's not only you that is going to benefit from getting your matric, your family, your community, the country, the entire economy is going to benefit from that. So those would be the third parties, your family. They are not directly involved in you writing your exams. You have to sit and write them. But once you get your matric, the income you earn from getting a job because you have a matric or being able to study further, that has positive benefits for other people not directly connected with you. And that's what a positive externality is. So it's a benefit to people or to groups of people that are not involved in the actual transaction, in this case, you getting a matric or getting an education. Another great example, guys, at the moment would be positive externalities of everyone getting their COVID vaccination. So if I get my COVID vaccination, I'm the one getting the vaccination, I'm the one involved in the transaction. But who else benefits from that? My family benefits, the children at the school where I teach benefit, the whole community benefits, the whole country benefits, because I'm now protected from COVID. So we would say that me going to get my COVID vaccination has positive externalities. Okay. Right, guys, so try and think of other examples of something that you do that has a positive benefit for other people, and that's positive externalities. Right, last, match the columns, everybody. Terms of trade. Terms of trade. You should only have two options left, so this one shouldn't take you too long, and we can look at the word trade to see if it can give us any clues. I'm going to put it up because this shouldn't take you too long. The answer is C, everybody. The ratio, which means the relationship between prices of exports and prices of imports. So if you looked at the word trade and you said, okay, let me see what links up with trade. Okay, imports and exports. And there you would have had your answer. Remember, exports are the products that a country sells to another country, and imports are the products a country buys from another country. Okie dokes, grade 12, well done. I hope you guys are with me. I hope you are taking this all in, and that you guys are learning something, and that lots of sparks are going off in your brain because you remember this stuff. Grade 12s, are there any questions about these match the columns? Is there anything I can repeat or help you with, or anything you'd like to ask or contribute? Okay, so just like I did with multiple choice, there are one or two things I just want to pick up. So we had a look at the capital market, and remember that was long-term investment, long-term funds. The other side of the coin is the money market, grade 12. We did this under the circular flow, and this is the market for short-term and very short-term savings and loans. We spoke about real figures in match the columns, and real figures are also known as figures at constant prices. So the other side of the coin for that is nominal figures, also known as GDP at current prices. Grade 12s, remember the difference between real and nominal figures. Real figures do not include the impact of inflation or price increases. Nominal figures do. Nominal figures are also called the money value of GDP. And so generally we would say that nominal figures tend to overestimate the value of GDP because they don't only include the value of production, they also include price increases that may have happened over time. Then we spoke in the match the columns about lagging indicators, and I mentioned our other indicators are leading indicators. Remember, we said a lagging indicator changes after the actual business cycle, so therefore what would a leading indicator do? It changes before the actual business cycle. And a good example of that is new car sales. As soon as we see new car sales going up, it gives us a clue, a hint, a little idea that maybe the actual business cycle or the actual economy, in other words, GDP, specifically real GDP, might be going to change in the same direction as new car sales. So leading indicators, grade 12, tell us where the economy is going. And our other indicator was coincident indicators. They change direction at the same time as the economy or business cycle, like real GDP, and they tell us the current state of the economy. Right, and then we've just spoken about positive externalities. So what is the opposite of that? The opposite of that is a negative externality. So grade 12s, with a positive externality, we use the word benefit. With a negative externality, we use the word costs. So this is a cost to a third party not involved in the production or consumption of a product. And a common example that is used is pollution. So you have a factory and they are producing chemicals, and instead of disposing of all their harmful toxic waste products responsibly, they just let them flow into a nearby river. And the people that live near the river might get sick because that water might be their drinking water, or their animals might drink that water and they might get sick. So that would be a negative externality. So the word we use is cost to a third party, and for a positive externality, the word is benefit. And here are some examples of negative externalities. So we've spoken about pollution, okay, household waste, noise pollution from noisy neighbors. That can affect me negatively. Air pollution from smoking, sitting in traffic, the impact of addiction. So you have a family member who's an addict or who's been to rehab, or you've had to live through that. That has an impact on you. Litter from tourists, and also rising levels of obesity. That has a negative externality or a cost on our health system, because people might not be as healthy as they could be. Alright, that's the match the columns, guys, which is the second part of section A of your question paper. So let us now go on, terms of trade as well. Terms of trade, remember we said it was the index of export and import prices. Here is the formula. Please, you must know this formula. So it would be export prices divided by your import prices times 100, grade 12s. That is what terms of trade is, comparing import and export prices. And an improvement in terms of trade could be because our export prices went up or our import prices went down. And you'll see later on in section B of the paper, we have a question on terms of trade. But all I wanted to do now, since we looked at it in the match the columns, was just to remind you that this is the formula that we use. Alright, let's finish off section A, everybody. So the 1.3 questions, grade 12s, they can be quite challenging. But remember what I said to you right at the beginning of this session. The two key things for you to do in order to get a minimum pass of 40%, which is what you're going for, is to learn your definitions and your concepts and your essays. Because if you learn your definitions and your concepts, you are covered for the whole of section A, which is 30 marks. You are covered for the point 1 questions in section B, and you are covered for the introduction to your essays. So definitions are very important. In fact, they come up in the 10-mark questions as well, like 2.3.3 or 2.4.3. Those point 3 questions, grade 12s, those are also definitions. So it is super, super important. I cannot emphasize that enough, that you must learn your definitions and your concepts. Right, so let's have a look. How would we do this? How do we approach this 1.3 section? So it says at the top here, know your concepts, underline the key words in the sentence. And guys, this is important. Write only one term. Do not write more than one answer. I hope you guys have got that message by now. I think it's the third time I'm saying it. If you write more than one answer, even if one of the answers is correct, you will not get the marks. Because how does the marker know which one you actually think is correct? You've written 2 options. Guys, some other very important things to remember for 1.3 grade 12. Abbreviations will be marked as incorrect. So if you say eco-growth instead of economic growth, that's incorrect. If you say SA Reserve Bank instead of South African Reserve Bank, you will not get the marks. Also, no acronyms. This is a big problem, guys. You cannot say SARB when the answer is South African Reserve Bank, or GDP when the answer is Gross Domestic Product, or MPC when the answer is Marginal Propensity to Consume. Please do not give acronyms. And then examples will also not be marked as correct. So if you give an example of the concept instead of giving the term, you will not get any marks. So please remember that. Right, let's go and do these 6 terminology questions. Right, here we go, guys. And can you see, again, this is the exact instruction that you will get in your paper. And it says, abbreviations, acronyms, and examples will not be accepted. Alright, guys, let's go. Let's see how you do. This is quite challenging normally, but let's see how you guys do. Right, the first one. The flow of goods and services between participants in the circular flow. So immediately you're like, okay, let me go to the filing cabinet in my brain that says circular flow, because this is something about the circular flow, and it's a flow of goods and services. Okay, what is that called? Guys, did you all get it? That is the real flow. The answers are going to come up at the bottom here, not on the side. So that is the real flow. And what is the opposite of the real flow? The money flow, which is the flow of income and expenditure. Right, the second one, everybody. Successive is one after the other, grade 12s. Successive periods of growth and decline in economic activities. So what in economics shows us when economic activities are growing and when they are slowing down? What is that called? No one has used the chat box yet. Would anyone like to be the first and put their answer into the chat box, grade 12s? 1.3.2. Does anyone know? And be brave enough to pop their answer in the chat box. Alright. Guys, the answer is the business cycle. I'm sure you all got that. Now the next one, grade 12s, 1.3.3. This, for some reason, is a very popular question. The removal of unnecessary restrictions by law. It comes up frequently in section A, either as a match the columns, a terminology, or as a multiple choice. Removal of unnecessary restrictions by law. So I want you to think of another word that you know of for law. It also starts with an L. So taking away legislation. And then do you guys know know a word for laws that starts with an R? Because that's the word I'm looking for. And the answer is deregulation. And guys, this comes from your section on the new economic paradigm and supply side measures. Because if we get rid of all the laws and all the regulations, all the red tape, remember we spoke about that earlier, if I can reduce all the forms a business has to fill out in order to get started and to start trading, they can start trading so much quicker, start employing people, and economic growth can happen. So removing unnecessary laws and regulations, in other words, deregulation, is a very important part of helping our economy to function more efficiently and effectively, and as part of supply side measures. Right, everybody. So those three questions, are from macroeconomics. Now let's shift gears and go over to microeconomics. So 1.3.4, everybody, let's read what it says. It says, a period of production, guys, period, so immediately you must think time, okay, something to do with time, where only the variable factor of production can change while at least one factor is fixed. Now in economics, it's either short-term or long-term, right? So if you have identified that period means time, then you know you've got to choose one of those. And the answer is the short term. Remember, in the longer term, all factors of production are variable. Right, the next one. This has got to do with your oligopolies and your monopolies, everybody. An exclusive right officially granted by government to an inventor to make and sell his or her invention. So this is when the government says only you can make and sell this product for a certain amount of time. Any idea what that's called, guys? So you can think of Thomas Edison and the light bulb. He would have wanted a patent so that only he could make light bulbs and make money off them. So this protects the inventor, and the answer is a patent. And it's one of the grade 12s that forms a barrier to entry when you're talking about imperfect markets. All right, everybody, and we've already spoken about negative externalities. So this question is asking, what are goods called that have negative externalities? And they give the examples of alcohol and tobacco. So if you remember, I said that goods which have positive externalities are known as merit goods. So what do you think goods that have negative externalities are called? Yes, demerit goods. Alright, so that is the answer for 1.3.6. So grade 12s, when you are studying and you are learning your definitions, please don't just have the word and write out the definition. Have the definition in front of you and make sure you can give the term. Because what we find is in section A of the paper, this is really where students lose the most marks, this 1.3 section. And the only way you're going to get the most marks possible here is if you practice this question. So remember, as I've said before, all past papers are online. You can access them and you can go and practice, sit half an hour and do a whole lot of 1.3s. Alright, to finish off section A, let's just go through some of the other things I've mentioned. 12. So I've mentioned the money flow, and I've said this is the flow of income and expenditure in the circular flow, so that is the other side of the coin of the real flow. We mentioned the short term. So what is the other side of the short term? The long term. It's where all variable factors of production can change. And we've just mentioned merit goods. These are goods that have positive externalities like education and healthcare. And we've spoken about the COVID-19 vaccine having positive externalities. So here are some examples of merit and demerit goods. So merit goods would be education, healthcare, libraries, museums, school feeding schemes. That's been in the news a lot. That has a lot of positive externalities. And then demerit goods, high caffeine energy drinks. You might not all agree with that, but okay. Unhealthy food, violent games, alcohol, tobacco. Here they put in hands-free phones. I guess even though it's hand-free, maybe you're distracted when you're driving and that could cause accidents. But they do talk here that when we're talking about demerit goods, there are value judgments involved. So grade 12, as long as you have in your mind at least 2 or 3 examples of what is a merit good and what is a demerit good, so that you can explain any answer about these things using examples. You don't have to agree with all the examples, especially for the demerit goods, but I want to give you a range and a choice, so you could find at least 2 or 3 examples so that you can use those in your exam answers. Alright guys, how are you doing? I hope you guys are doing well. We have another 45 minutes until our break, but I'm going to give you a little stretch break now before we go on to section B of the paper. And I'm going to quickly put myself onto camera. If some of you joined late and you guys didn't see me, hi everybody. I hope you guys are all doing well. I hope you learned something. I hope this is useful to you. Please participate if you are able to. You can type in the chat box. If you have a mic, please put yourself onto mic and just let me know how you're doing and how things are going. And to my fellow educators, good to see you guys in these trying times. Right, guys, have a quick 1-minute break, and then we'll do our last 45 minutes before you guys go and have your tea break. Alright guys, let's get started. I hope you all wriggled your fingers and toes and stretched and maybe stood up and waved your arms around, or just had a quick chat to the person next to you just to refresh the brain so that you can focus for the last part of our first session this morning. Anything from your side, guys, please type anything in the chat box if you want to, if you're able to. Put mic on if you're able to, chat to me. Okay, but in the absence of anything from your side, let's continue, everybody. So guys, we can go on to now section B. And remember what I said in the beginning, we are just looking at the 10-mark questions today for macro and microeconomics. And remember, you will be given 3 questions. So it will be question 2, 3, and 4. Remember what I said as well is that for each question paper there are 2 main topics. So let's take paper 1. It's macroeconomics and economics pursuits, grade 12s. So question 2 will be on macroeconomics. Question 3 will be economic pursuits. And then question 4 will be a combination of both of those. So your first task is to choose either question 2 or 3, whichever one you're strongest at, and then perhaps question 4, or if it's a really nice question that you feel confident to answer, you could do question 3 as well. But that's the way the paper is structured. So 1 question in section B for each of the main topics, and then question 4 is a combination. Right, just let me see why this is not moving on. There we go. Right. So, what are you going to find when you open up your paper and look at question 2, 3, and 4? You will find cartoons, diagrams, graphs, extracts. There are 2 10-mark questions, normally referring to the data. So this is questions 2.2, 2.3, 3.2, 3.3, 4.2, 4.3. And remember, you're doing 2 of them. So remember, in the 10 marks, this is how the questions are structured. And you'll see now as we go through them. So grade 12 is really important and useful to know the structure of the exam paper, because it gives you a level of security. You're going into the exam, you know what that paper is going to look like. So, the point 1 questions, they are for 1 mark, and they are what we call lower order questions. So it would be 1-word answers, and they are taken from the data that you're given, or they relate to it. The point 2 questions are also 1-word answers, or it's 1 sentence, also taken from the data or refer to the data. Your point 3 questions are definition. So again, definitions are super important. This is for 2 marks. And you'll see as we go through the questions that the point 3s are definitions. And then the slightly more difficult questions are the point 4 and the point 5 questions. So here you must write in full sentences. Okay, remember to write in full sentences. Use all the economics words that you know. Use correct terminology. And on the point 5, we can add that very often you are required to substantiate your answer. What does substantiate mean? Substantiate means you must give a reason for your answer. So this is often where you may be asked for a solution to a problem, or reasons for a problem that exists. And then you must be able to back up or give reasons for what you are saying, grade 12s. Alrighty, let's practice, guys. Right, so we're starting with our macroeconomic questions. So the first one, and we would all know the circular flow, having done it in grade 10. So often you will breathe a big sigh of relief when you see the circular flow and look at this nice, simple diagram. So guys, step 1 is to look at the diagram. So what do I have? Okay, I have firms and households, and I have the factor and the goods market, and what are they showing me on the arrows? Spending, income, alright. So I know that this is the circular flow. It's a section of the circular flow. And grade 12, let's look at the structure. Can you see questions go 1, 1, 2, 2, 4? Every single 10-mark question has that exact same structure. Alright? So that gives you a level of security and a level of certainty. And the point 3 question, can you see it says briefly describe the term. And you will see all the point 3 questions are definition type questions. Alright, guys, let's tackle this question. Here we go. Give the economic concept illustrated above. Well, we already know that. That is the flow of income and spending in the circular flow. So I would say that if you had written the economic circular flow model, it would be correct. But remember, you always want to try and give the most correct answer. Let that person marking your paper know that you 100% know what's going on. And remember, in the diagram in this question, they only show us spending and income. So it's the flow of income and spending. You could perhaps have said the money flow in the economic circular flow. Alright, the next question, everybody. What type of income do households receive? So I want you to think about your factors of production. And remember, we have 4 factors of production. And each factor of production receives an income. And households are the owners of the factors of production. Households provide labor in the economy. So guys, think to yourselves, what is the reward for labor? Okay, do you guys all know that? Wages and salaries. The bottom of the slide, I'm going to put up the rewards for the other factors of production. But that would be the answer to 2.2.2, everybody, wages and salaries. That's the income households receive. Right, next question is our definition of the circular flow. So, I've underlined your key terms, grade 12s. It's a simplification of the economy. That's the first thing you can say. Second thing you can say, it shows how the economy works. Third thing you could say, it shows the relationship between income, production, and spending in the economy as a whole. So I'll just pause there in case you guys are writing these answers down. I will let you work on some of the questions and then go through them. But for now, let's just do these first few step by step together. Alright, everybody. I'm hoping I can carry on and you guys are all ready to go on. If I'm going too fast, please can someone tell me? Right, next one. The role of the factor market. So remember, we've got the factor market and the goods market. Remember, grade 12s, a market is a situation where buyers and sellers come together to exchange goods and services for money. Remember, a market does not have to be a physical place. We've all experienced, or we are all aware, that we can buy things online over the internet. And especially during COVID, the internet became a massive marketplace, much bigger than it was before. So what does the factor market do? Factors of production are traded on the factor market. Remember, it's only for 2 marks, so you just have to give one of these different options that I'm giving. So, that first sentence, factors of production are traded on the factor market. The factor market brings together households who are the owners or sellers of factors of production and businesses who are buyers. I could have actually put in there, grade 12's, businesses and government, because of course government also purchases factors of production. And then what are my 4 factors of production? Natural resources, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship are traded. So what we would be looking for in that answer is something about the buying and selling of the factors of production. Alright, everybody, I hope you've all managed to get something down for that answer. Alright, so let's do the last question, which is your 4-mark question. And remember, I said that this is going to be a slightly more difficult one, where you may be asked to be given opinion or link different concepts, but it requires a little bit more information, grade 12s. Okay, I hope you're all ready for me to go on. So this was discuss the interaction between households and firms. So let's have a look at this. Households are the owners of factors of production, and what do they do with those factors of production? They sell the factors of production to firms. So that's your first key point. Households sell factors of production to firms. What do firms do with these factors of production? firms use the factors of production to produce goods and services. So that's your first connection between the household and the firm, is the buying and selling of factors of production. But of course, no one is going to sell something without getting an income in return. So that's the second part of the answer, grade 12s. Firms pay households for the factors of production, which is an income for households. And if you look at the diagram on this question, it clearly shows that. There's income and there's spending. And households purchase the goods and services produced by businesses, and of course they must pay for them. So households pay the businesses for these goods and services, which is revenue or income for the business. So it's the exchanging of goods and services and factors of production, and then the payments received and made for those. And so what I've just got here is a reminder for you of our 4 factors of production, which is land or natural resources, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, and then the reward for each one, which is rent for land, wages and salaries for labor, interest for capital, and profit for the entrepreneur or for entrepreneurship. Grade 12s, is there anything for this question, question 2, our first section B question, that you would like me to repeat, or anything you'd like me to go over again? Alright, let's go on to question 3, everybody then. Still on macroeconomics, and this is to do with our national income calculations, our national income aggregates. So before we answer the question, there are just a few things that I wanted to point out to you if you have a look at this table. So the first thing, can you see that they've got at the top here gross value added? Now remember, just a reminder, gross value added is the same as GDP. Okay, so there are 2 terms which both indicate measuring economic activity, and gross value added, grade 12s, is used when calculating economic activity using the production method. You will know that the production method is also known as the value added method. So gross value added is specifically related to the production method. So I firstly wanted to remind you of that. And then I wanted to remind you of the different sectors or the different industries or sectors of the economy that these industries are part of. So remember, we learned earlier on today that an industry is a whole lot of businesses which produce the same product or are engaged in the same type of economic activity. And in our economy, we have 3 sectors. So for example, agriculture, forestry and fishing, as well as mining and quarrying. Those are part, of the primary sector, extracting resources from nature. So that would be the primary sector. Then anything to do with trade, catering, accommodation. Previously I mentioned transport and insurance when we were looking at the balance of payments. Anything to do with services is the tertiary sector. Manufacturing is part of the secondary sector. And the other industries in the secondary sector are construction and electricity, gas and water. And then again, we've got examples of industries here from the tertiary sector. So I just wanted to remind you of that. All right, everybody. I am going to give you about 5 minutes see if you can do question 321, 322, and 323. Okay, let's see if you can get down some answers for that. I'm going to start the timer now, and then we will go through them. Please remember for 323, write in nice long sentences. In fact, it won't even take you 5 minutes. Right, off you go, guys. All right, everybody, just another few seconds and then we'll go through this. All right, guys, let's get started. Is there anyone that would like to tell me by typing in the chat box or popping on their mic which method was used in the calculation of GDP above? I've already mentioned it, so I hope you guys got that. Alright, so guys, it's the production method. Okay? If you had written the value added method, that would also be fine. Okay? Both would have been correct. Now this next question is an interesting one, grade 12s. Let's see what it says. List one aggregate measure of economic activity. So remember, aggregate means total. So list one measure of economic activity that we can use. Okay, so these are some of the options you could have had. Gross domestic product, gross national product, gross national income, gross national expenditure, and gross domestic expenditure. So it's anything that measures total economic activity in one way or another. Probably GDP would be the one that you would be most familiar with, and maybe GNB. Then for 323, a definition of GDP. Can you see? Grade 12s, it's our point 3 question. And again, it's a definition. So let's look at the key things we must have in any definition of GDP. First thing, final goods and services. Remember, we do not include intermediate goods and services when calculating GDP because that leads to double counting, which overestimates the value of GDP. So you must put that word final in. Then, the defining characteristic of GDP is that it's a domestic figure. So production is measured within the borders of a country. So you must put that in. That is your next important key term, within the border of a country. And lastly, it's for a specific period of time. So within a given period of time. So those are the three key things we must see in your definition of gross domestic product, grade 12s. Final goods and services, within the borders of a country, and within a specific period of time. Alright, and then the next one could be quite a tricky question if you haven't done this. What is the purpose of national accounts? So the purpose, grade 12s, is to provide a complete system for each country of drawing up their national accounts. Remember that the format of the national accounts is set out for all countries, so that each country draws up their GDP figures in the same method, using the same tables, and that makes international comparisons possible. So that's very important. So your keywords would be a complete system. So it's a system, it's done in a systematic, specific way. And what does this allow us to do, grade 12s? It allows us to compare the GDP of different countries. So to make international comparisons. Alright, I hope that's okay for everybody. So let's go on to the last question, if that's okay with you all. Is everyone with me? So the last question was the calculation question, everybody, and I want you all to try that. It says, calculate gross value add at basic prices for the year 2020. So I'm going to give you a minute and let's see if you guys can figure out how to do that, and then we'll go through it. Alright, how are you guys doing? Have you all managed to do it? So grade 12s, with this question, can you see that they haven't included any of the taxes, any of the subsidies? So it is a very straightforward, easy question. All that we do is we add together the contributions of each of the different industries. So all of those figures, and remember it's for the year 2020, so make sure you are adding the figures in the correct column. Don't make that mistake. And so we just add together those 5 different figures, and that is our answer. Please remember to put the rand sign in, and you'll see what I've done is I've put the ticks in here. Remember, this is for 4 marks. Okay? And so I showed you that you get 2 marks for showing me that it's adding up all the figures, and then 2 marks for the correct answer. So even if you make a calculation error and you get the answer wrong, you can still get your 2 marks over there. And as said, please remember to put the rand sign in the answer. That's very important. And then just to end off, a reminder, grade 12s, to end off this question, of our 3 methods of calculating GDP. So we've got the production method, which we have just looked at, adds the final value of all goods and services produced in the different sectors. We've got the income method, which adds income earned by owners of factors of production. So that's the one which has compensation for employees, net operating surplus, consumption of fixed capital. And then we've got the expenditure method, which is closely tied to the circular flow, leakages and injections. And this adds the spending of the 4 main economic sectors. Consumption, which is households, government investments, which is businesses, and exports minus imports. So those are the 3 different methods. And in this question, we've looked at the production method. Alrighty. Excellent, guys. Right, so to end off our first session, let's have a look at the multiplier. Right, so that is what this question is about, everybody. It's about the multiplier. And let's have a look at the diagram, because this might not be a diagram that you are familiar with. So remember, if you get something in the exam and you're like, oh, I haven't really seen that before, don't panic. Take a deep breath and try and figure out, what do I know about this diagram? What makes sense to me on this diagram? And guys, that's what we're going to do. So before we even start looking at the questions, we are going to have a look at this diagram, because it might look slightly different to diagrams that you have seen before. So just to remind you about the multiplier, everybody, remember it's a process where there's a change in spending, and this changes level of output and income by more than the initial change in spending. So let's just say that again. There is a change in spending in the economy. So there's an injection. For example, government is going to build a road. But the value that is added to the economy as a result of that injection is much larger than the original injection. That's what we are saying. So let's read it again. There's an initial change in spending, and this changes the level of income and output by more than that first or initial injection or change in spending. That's what the multiplier is. Now, we can either have a 2-sector or a 4-sector model. And this question is to do with the 4-sector model. But let's go through the 2-sector model to remind ourselves. In the 2-sector model, grade 12s, excuse me, the 2 sectors are the household and the business. And we look only at MPC and MPS. So MPC is marginal propensity to consume, which means the amount of each rand earned that is spent. And if we had to calculate the multiplier using the MPC, we would use this formula. 1 over 1 minus MPC. Or we could look at the MPS. What does that stand for? That is the marginal propensity to save. What does that mean? That means the amount of each rand earned that is saved. So grade 12s, in the 2-sector model, there are only 2 things you can do with your money. You can spend it or you can save it. So for each 1 rand that you earned, you can only spend some of it and save some of it. Remember that MPC plus MPS is equal to 1. So I'm hoping you are all familiar with that 2-sector model. But this question is stretching our grey cells, because it is about a 4-sector model, grade 12s. So in a 4-sector model, we are looking at savings, taxes, and imports. Now hopefully, when I say those 3 words, savings, taxes, and imports, they are ringing a bell and you are thinking leakages from the circular flow. So what the 4-sector model does, grade 12s, is it looks at these 4 leakages and their impact on any injection that might happen. So MPS is marginal propensity to save, exactly as it was up here. MRT is tax, the marginal rate of tax, and MPM is marginal propensity to import. Right, that's just to remind you, what is multiplier? What is the 2-sector model? What are my formulas? What is the 4-sector model? What is the formula? Grade 12s, are there any questions on that? Right, let's have a look at this graph that you have been given. So, Y, remember Y stands for aggregate income, and we can see that is here on the x-axis. Now you may not all have seen the letter A in a multiplier diagram before. You might be more used to seeing the letter E. don't panic. Okay, it means the same thing. They are just using the letter A to indicate that this is aggregate expenditure. You might know it as E or AE, but we still have expenditure on the y-axis. Here it's just indicated by A with a line on top of the A, which tells me it's aggregate expenditure, and then we have income on the x-axis. Y equals A, that is my Keynesian 45-degree line. Remember, that is where aggregate income is equal to aggregate expenditure. It's our line of equilibrium. So any point on this line is going to be a point where income is equal to expenditure. Alright, and then my two functions that I've been given. C plus R plus G, that would be a closed economy, so that's over here. So aggregate expenditure is equal to consumption plus investment plus government spending. And then A1 on the graph, that is an open economy. Consumption plus investment spending plus government spending plus exports minus imports. Alright, so now we've gone through what the multiplier is. We've reminded ourselves that we do in fact have something called the four-sector model, and this is what the question is about. We've unpacked the graph. We now know what we're looking at. We know what the A stands for, and we know what these functions mean. So now we can go ahead and answer questions, grade 12s. So the first question. I hope you all know that this is the four-sector model. Because we have that function with aggregate expenditure is equal to C plus R plus G plus X minus M. Okay, we've got exports and imports in there. What does Y0 represent? The equilibrium level of income in a closed economy. So guys, I want you to have a look at your diagram. Have a look at Y0 on the x-axis and follow the dotted line until it gets to the 45-degree line. Can you see that is where the function for the closed economy intersects the 45-degree line? So I'm going to say that all again. Find Y0 on your x-axis. Follow the dotted line up until it intersects your 45-degree line. That's your Y equals A line. Can you see that that is the same point where your function for a closed economy intersects the equilibrium line, your 45-degree line? So Y0 is the equilibrium level of income in a closed economy. All right. Okie dokes. I hope you guys have all got that. Right, the next one. What is marginal propensity to consume? Remember, your point 3 questions are always going to be your definition questions. So it's the percentage of each rand earned by households that is spent. Grade 12s, that would be sufficient. The rest that I've put in here is just to help you understand it. So for example, if there's an MPC of 0.65, it indicates that for every extra rand that I earn, I spend 65 cents. If I was in a two-sector model, then I would save 35 cents, and that would be my NPS. Remember that as disposable income increases, and I've mentioned before what disposable income is, your NPC will also increase. So the more I earn, the more I have available to spend after tax. But if you are simply looking for the answer, it is this first underlying part. That is your definition of the NPC, everybody. The rest is just to explain to you what it is so that you can see some numbers as well. So grade 12, it's coming up for our break time. What we are going to do is just finish 4.2.4 then you are going to go off and have a nice break, have something to eat, drink, and then we will do the last part of this question after the break. Alright. Guys, let's look at 4.2.4. It says, explain the Keynesian approach to fiscal policy. So, firstly, remember fiscal policy is government's income and expenditure. And guys, the Keynesians were very big on demand-side policies. You've done demand-side policies under business cycles and the new economic paradigm, and that is really what the economist John Maynard Keynes put forward as one of his main ideas. So that is what our answer is. Keynesians believe that markets are unstable and government intervention is required. What should the government do? Because remember the questions about fiscal policy. The government should increase spending, that is part of fiscal policy, to increase demand and ensure economic growth. So for example, the government could spend money on infrastructure projects, so that could be something like building roads. That would stimulate demand for everything you need to build the road, including labor. People would earn an income, and they would in turn spend that income, which means demand for consumer goods and services would increase. So the Keynesians believed that government should intervene in the economy, and how should they do that? They should do that using fiscal policy, spending, which is part of fiscal policy, to increase demand. And that was their approach to economic growth. All right, everybody. Whoopsie, sorry. Okay. I hope that you guys have that. During the break, if you think of any questions to do with this multiplier question, because it is a fairly challenging one, please let me know. And if there's anything I must repeat, then I will gladly do so. But go and have a wonderful break. I will see you back here at 11 o'clock sharp to finish this multiplier question and to some more macroeconomics. I hope you guys are learning lots, and I hope this is very useful to you. I will see you shortly. Enjoy.